Zimbabwe is preparing for a historic election on Monday, the first in 38 years without former leader Robert Mugabe on the ballot. But voters and observers are cautious in their optimism amid concerns over whether it will be a free and fair poll and whether the victor will actually deliver on promises to bring change. VOA's Anita Powell reports from the streets of the capital, Harare.
A new dawn in Zimbabwe as the nation holds historic elections? Depends who you ask. Opposition supporter Whitman Stick has been waiting outside this Harare bank since literally before dawn for dollars. She says she's fed up and voting for opposition leader Nelson Chamisa.
We want to get U.S. dollars without having to queue at the bank.
8 months after President Emerson Mnangagwa's inauguration, Zimbabweans' main concern, the economy, is little improved. Cash is difficult to get. Mnangagwa, who took over in November after the resignation of Mugabe, promised at his inauguration that he would take urgent action to fix the cash crisis. That hasn't happened yet. In the capital, feelings about the poll, in which Mnangagwa is the frontrunner, vary widely.
Very much excited. The environment has been pretty peaceful, and the campaigning has been peaceful as well. And we've been going about our businesses normally, without fear or anything. So yeah, it's been great.
It's going to create many jobs for our youngsters, for our people, you know. I'm going to vote for ZANU-PF.
I'm not sure if there's ever going to be a real change. So there's not that much excitement for the meantime. Because as far as I'm concerned, it's just the same for years and years. So there is not that much hope.
Observers are reserving their judgment amid accusations of voter intimidation and problems with the voter roll.
It's too early to make pronouncements at this stage.
But rights groups say the news is not all bad.
Our partners on the ground have been saying that there is subtle voter intimidation, which is not as blatant as what we have witnessed before in 2008.
So is this going to be a transformation, or are the big promises only words? As Monday's vote nears, Zimbabweans can't seem to agree, but everyone is paying attention. Anita Powell, VOA News, Harare.
Now, for more insight into Zimbabwe's politics, I'm joined by Leon Hartwell, a Southern Africa political analyst who has lived and written extensively on Zimbabwe's politics. Leon, welcome to Africa 54.
Thank you for having me.
First off, we're counting hours before the polls opened in Zimbabwe. What are your expectations on the outcome of this presidential election?
Thank you. I think it's basically going to be a two-horse race. Based on what we've seen from Afrobarometer released a poll recently, and the current President Emerson Mnangagwa is leading with 3 points. The second strong contender in this race is Mr. Nelson Chamisa. He's very young. He's 40 years old. He uses religion quite a bit in order to try and garner voters and so on. So it's going to be an interesting election.
Now, if you look at the two of them, because now they're the front runners, no question about this, what are the major differences in their vision for Zimbabwe?
I think in terms of their vision, they have actually very similar policies. So what it's going to boil down to is a lot about the historical context of this election. People have very tainted image of elections in Zimbabwe because of past voter intimidation and so on. It's also going to boil down to personalities. Emerson Mnangagwa has done a fairly good job to try and present himself as a new reformed individual, even though he has been with President Robert Mugabe since 1980, side by side working with him. Nelson Chamisa, to some individuals, he seems like a breath of fresh air. He's 40 years old. Many of the voters in Zimbabwe are young individuals, and so they look at this maybe as an opportunity for renewal.
Now, again, when you look at what's going on the ground, a lot of people are concerned as to whether they will accept the outcome of this election. Which way do you think it will go, and what do you expect any chaos or any major disagreements?
That's a very difficult question, and in Africa we have this saying when two elephants fight, the grass gets trampled in the process. And so looking at the statistics, it looks like it's going to be a close race. I think we basically have three scenarios. One scenario, ZANU-PF wins. The opposition might try and say, it wasn't free and fair or whatever, but I think, things will go along the same direction. And then the second scenario is where the MDC wins with Chamisa as president. If that's the case, I think the security sector will step in. I'm not sure whether they would accept the election, even though they've said they will. But I'm skeptical because of the November coup. And then the third scenario, you might have a situation where none of these two candidates get 50% plus one of the votes, with the result then being that they would go into a runoff election.
Very quickly, Leon, you mentioned the coup. Mugabe said, he was ousted by the military. Which way do you think he will be voting?
That's a very hard question. We haven't heard much from former President Robert Mugabe, although there have been one or two splinter parties that formed as, who claim, they represent some of his interests.
Do you think he will be going to the ZANU-PF or the opposition?
I think in general he would try and keep quiet as possible, because that might be part of the deal. Stay out of politics, and your interest and your family's interest might be protected.
Leon, thank you very much. Let's hope for the best for Zimbabweans and peace as well.
Thank you.
Leon Hartwell is a Southern African political analyst. Now, still on Zimbabwe's politics, young people say their vote could bring about the desired change the country needs. As the battle for the 2018 presidential election narrows down to two frontrunners, President Emmerson Mnangagwa of the ruling ZANU-PF party and the main opposition leader Nelson Chamisa of MDC Alliance. VOA's Paul Ndiho is in Harare for us and has filed this report.
A drive through downtown Harare ahead of Monday's poll gives you just a glimpse of what the future holds for Zimbabwe. Long lines of people waiting to withdraw money from their banks. A dire financial situation has arguably worsened under President Mnangagwa, who failed to address chronic cash shortages that are choking businesses and the poor. The president's supporters disagree and say he is the man for the job.
President Mnangagwa has articulated his vision very well for this country, and his vision has been articulated since he took over office after the new dispensation. And we already see the implementations of some of the promises that he has made to the people, and we want to stay on that track.
The youth vote will be crucial. Perhaps it could shape the future of Zimbabwe, as the election is being cast as a fight between the old guard of independence war heroes and a younger generation.
Vote for the President of Zimbabwe, His Excellency Comrade D. Mnangagwa, because after the new dispensation, he has actually managed to open up, resuscitate the industries, farming, mining, and agriculture as well.
Critics say this general election is like no other. Opposition leader Nelson Chamisa, MDC Alliance, has galvanized his opposition party with simple speeches and promises of economic revival. At 40 years old, he is Zimbabwe's youngest ever presidential candidate. Earlier this week, at his party headquarters, he urged the youth and the party members to come out in large numbers for Monday's election.
We were born in a very difficult economy, and our hope is that on the 30th, after we vote, things can change for the better for Zimbabwe, because we are hoping for a better future for ourselves.
Young voters said they are fed up with ZANU-PF's policies that have run down Zimbabwe and should make way for younger leaders like Chamisa.
What kind of change do you want to see here in Zimbabwe?
We need to have leaders who are accountable. We need to have leaders who are transparent. We need to have leaders who are focused and also who can lead and put our economy front.
Thousands of young people graduate from university every year to join the ranks of unemployed. Many ache a living hawking wares and airtime on the streets. While young voters in the past have been comfortable neglecting the importance of voting, They now realize that their voice matters because democracy doesn't work without citizen participation.
Largely himself, he has been corrupt. I mean, he has been in government for the past 38 years. So what new change does he want to bring when he failed to bring change in the past 38 years?
Paul Ndiho, VOA News, Harare.